Hi, I'm Paul Farrer, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about some behind the scenes bits of how I came up with the music to the wheel. This is my Logic system. I'm running all the various instruments and things that I've got in Logic. The track starts with the spine of some funky drum loops, which sound a little bit like this. There's also this one. And this one. So I wanted to have a sort of a 90s New Jack Swing feel, and this goes all the way through, tied to the bass. And I've got a slap bass. Now, slap basses traditionally are the most uncool 1990s Jerry Seinfeld kind of thing, but for this, I'm quite drawn towards things that are a little bit uncool because they became cliches because they're really effective. And you see how effective a slap bass can be. A funky slap bass when laid against the rhythm, because you play it and already you're tapping your toes like this. Just really effective. Got some funk guitar lines here which are quite dry and sparse, like a lot of funk guitar sounds tend to be. You can see them match up with the bass. And then there's a low piano which just augments what the bass is doing. That runs along like that. And I have some brass sounds here that I wanted it to be very sort of Saturday night and brassy. So I've got some sampled brass here, which sounds like the brass section moves through it like this. So that's trombone, trumpets and sax. But I always like working with real instruments and real performers as much as you possibly can. So those brass parts were replaced by an unbelievably talented brass player that I worked with, a guy called Sam Ewens, who played extra lines on top of that and sort of replaced the synth version. So these are Sam's parts here. So we've got those mixed in as well. Oh, at the start of the track here, we've got the spinning wheel effect of the wheel itself flying around. It's a combination of loads and loads and loads of different sort of spinning effects. That starts it off. But the main spine of the song is played on a clavinet. Now, a clavinet, for those of you who don't know, is kind of like it's sort of a very early piano. It's crossed between a harpsichord and a piano. It's like a smaller version of a piano that's not very resonant. It's just sort of got the strings. And because it's very old, a lot of composers used to use these to compose, in the days before, they obviously had a lot of other instruments to play with. Mozart had a clavinet, Beethoven, there's all these great people. And it's quite a thin, wiry, metallic sound, that. And funk music uses clavinet really well because it sort of puts it through a sort of a flangey, phasey, wah-wah pedal type thing. And you can layer sort of two or three together that gives a really sort of good, percussive, funky noise like this. See, that's got a bit of distortion on that one. But if you play all three of them together, you get this kind of effect. And that's our central riff, which I've augmented with a Hammond organ. And a little sort of synth line here. So when you play all those three together, you'll see it glues nicely to the rhythm track here, and also if we include the slap bass. Now, the sung part, the vocals on the wheel, went through sort of a weird process because it actually started a different idea that I'd had for a theme tune for a wheel, completely different. It was a completely different rhythm and a completely different key. And I'd written it almost like a sung jingle. It had sort of about 3 verses and it was about sort of 40 seconds long. And Michael didn't really like it, but he quite liked the idea of just using the words "the wheel." So I took the vocals from a totally different demo, pitched them up a notch, stretched them so they fit with this new tempo and groove, and ended up with a sort of a weird, sort of stretched version of the lyric "The Wheel," which sounds like this. The wheel. And you can see it sounds a bit sort of lumpy and artificial, which is absolutely right, because it was that was sung over a totally different piece of music. But when we found out that actually that quite worked, I think they liked the idea of branding the show with the wheel and these just saying it 3 times. I got my vocalist to re-sing it and layer it up again to make it sound much richer. And the vocalist is an absolutely tremendous singer called Sanna Hartfield, who's based in Sweden, and she came up with these 3 different layers that made it sound, much, much better. And they sound like this. The wheel. This one. The wheel. This one. The wheel. So 3 or 4 different takes of that mixed in with the weird lumpy synthy one just sort of seemed to sound quite good. And this is what the last vocal sounds like. The wheel. So now we've got all these various different bits. Oh, there were some other little vocal bits that we did. We did have an idea of having some lyrics saying "step inside the wheel" or "come and take on the wheel" or "can you complete the wheel" or all sorts of other stuff. And she sang those brilliantly. But in the end, we just sort of went, no, let's just strip it out. Let's just annoy everyone with the lyrics on their own. Trying to think of what else we've got here. Oh yeah, we've got a little bit of strings. The lift section at the end here. The last bit here. This we've got some orchestral brass and some strings. Let's just give it a kind of a shiny feel. I've got a little bit of a gospel choir in there. So then all of these different elements, the strings, the brass, percussion, guitars, bass, all those sort of things, build to a sort of a climax where again we hear our rising wheel effect sound. A few little bits of drums here. And then our main little hook here. I've also added a few extra little bits. So I think there's some timpani here, extra synths, those kind of things. There's a timpani down there. There's also some orchestral stabs. That's fun. I've forgotten I did that. That's here's an old firm BBC favourite. This you might recognise this stab. That's quite funny. That is using a stab from another BBC production on the BBC. Anyway, they're all in there, and yeah, so it sounds fuller at the end than it does at the beginning. That's the hope, that you introduce all these ideas and then they grow across the track, and then it all sort of comes together in a sort of little capsule at the end. And this end section here, this last sort of bar, we can use as what we call a sting, so we can drop it through the show at various different points. So when you add all that together, this is looking at the piano roll in Logic that shows us where all the notes are and what's happening in time with the beats of the bar at the top. You can follow along. This is what it sounds like.